You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, as we all know, Judge Cannon has dismissed Trump's prosecution in the Florida classified documents case under this bogus notion that special counsels, meaning Jack Smith, are unconstitutional. So, first things first here. How quickly do you expect, once this case is appealed to the 11th Circuit to rule on the appeal? And if they find that she acted improperly, could they remand it back to a trial court under a different judge?
Yeah, to answer the last question first, they could absolutely send it back to another judge, and that would be the best thing that happened to the case and to the interests of justice. But, the first question, Brian, is what took her so long? I mean, we knew all along Trump-appointed Judge Aileen Cannon was going to get rid of this case one way or another. And stay with me here, and I hope our viewers will stay with us, because this may end up being the best damn thing that has happened to Donald Trump's Florida prosecution for what? Illegally retaining classified documents, obstructing justice, and violating our nation's espionage laws. This is a big flippin' deal case because the man is being nominated, by the Republican Party to, perhaps be president of the United States again. And he put our country at extreme risk. An extreme national security risk. So this may end up being the best thing that ever happened to this case. It will ultimately and inevitably be appealed to the 11th Circuit. Regarding the timing of how quickly they might take it up, I actually am not optimistic. They're going to do it on an expedited basis. They may, but I think at this point, Brian, we have all sort of given up hope that there will be another criminal trial for Donald Trump for his many crimes before the election. So I don't know that urgency is of the moment the way it was several months ago when we thought more of these prosecutions might get to trial before the November election. So this may be put on the more normal track, at least on the timing front, and the 11th Circuit will order briefs, will have oral arguments, will take some time. So it could be not just a matter of weeks, but a matter of a couple of months before we get an opinion out of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. I believe that opinion will be probably the third Judge Cannon reversal, because this case, this issue, has been litigated by federal court judge after federal court judge after federal, four in all, this precise issue, and every single one, most of them with far more judicial experience than Aileen Cannon, said no, no, no. These appointments are lawful, they are constitutional, and special counsel absolutely is entitled to do this kind of work on behalf of the Department of Justice.
Glenn, given the fact that this case was dismissed on the grounds that a special counsel is unconstitutional, can the DOJ just swap out Jack Smith for a sitting U.S. attorney in the Florida documents case and in the D.C. 2020 election case and simply remedy the issue?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes, because if the whole concern was that you brought a civilian in from outside of the Department of Justice, and here's the irony, Brian, the reason Merrick Garland did it was to give some separation between the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, and by extension, the President, the White House, give some separation and some independence to the special counsel so he wouldn't, be tainted by pressures from the White House and the Attorney General. And of course, now what this case contemplates is that no, you should just have some of the regular U.S. attorneys still under the control, authority, and supervision of the Attorney General. Those should be the prosecutors handling this case. So it's a great question, and absolutely they can simply swap out Jack Smith, put a new lead prosecutor on the case, who could be one of the 93 United States attorneys. It doesn't necessarily have to be the one down in Florida. And here's the other thing. They can simply bring Jack Smith onto the team. So institutional knowledge will not even be lost. But here's the thing. If they bring somebody else in, a U.S. attorney, for example, they're going to have to represent the case to a grand jury. They're going to have to get the case re-indicted, and then they're going to have to get it back on track. But there's really no reason that all the work that has already gone into this goes away and they have to start from jump. It will all kind of be brought under the umbrella of the new case, and it will continue to move forward.
Glenn, do they kind of get two bites at the apple here? Because, for example, let's say that this works its way up to the 11th Circuit and they remand it back to the trial court under a new judge and they can keep moving. And let's say the Supreme Court agrees with the 11th Circuit. And so now you have this case with Jack Smith at the helm, moving forward with a new judge, which is best case scenario. Or let's say it goes up to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court agrees with Judge Cannon. Then could they dismiss the case, but could the DOJ just say, hold on before you dismiss it, we're going to re-indict this case under a new prosecutor? Could one of those two situations happen?
Absolutely. So I think at the end of the day,
or I should ask actually, could kind of the DOJ hold its powder, so to speak, and wait for one of those two situations to occur?
Yes, there's going to be a lot of strategic and tactical decisions to be made by the Department of Justice. They could jump right to what would be a bulletproof solution to this problem and say, okay, Jack Smith, there may be some question about the legality of his appointment. Fine, we're bringing a U.S. attorney, Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney to head up the investigation and prosecution.
But if that happens, then could it go back to Judge Cannon? And we don't want that. So isn't it more beneficial to allow this process to play out and allow the 11th Circuit to rule so that we can get this case in front of a different judge?
Yes, but it wouldn't necessarily be in front of a different judge. Remember, I think there are only 3 judges in that portion of the federal jurisdiction down in Florida. So unless there is a motion to recuse, to finally kick her off the case because her impartiality might reasonably be questioned, I maintain one way or another that motion has to be litigated, because if not, the case could end up being re-indicted and returned to Judge Cannon. And that is something that I don't think is in the interests of justice, given the way she has handled, presiding over this case at every turn, doing every benefit and favor for Donald Trump.
I agree. Okay, and now what about the second scenario where it does get to the Supreme Court? How would that work? Let's say it gets appealed to the 11th Circuit. Regardless of what the 11th Circuit says, it's going to be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Let's say the U.S. Supreme Court agrees with Judge Cannon. At what point can the DOJ say, hold on, you can't dismiss this case yet, we're just simply going to remedy it?
Yeah, so here's the thing, Brian. I don't see that as a viable scenario. If the Supreme Court decides that Judge Cannon was right, there's no way the Department of Justice is going to be able to tell the Supreme Court, wait a minute, before you issue your mandate. In other words, before any ruling is absolutely final and set in stone, we're going to try to back up and we're going to, rearrange some of the deck chairs to try to remedy the deficiency of Jack Smith's appointment. I don't see that as a viable option. Of course, I also don't see the Supreme Court siding with Judge Cannon. Now, I could be dead wrong, because this Supreme Court has shown itself not to be an honest broker of the law by any stretch. But, when you look back to the Nixon case, I don't want to get bogged down in the details, but, the Nixon opinion, when they questioned in litigation the legality of a special counsel, unanimously, I think it was 8 judges, 1 recused, said, no, special counsel are fine. They can be appointed by attorneys general. And so, Judge Cannon looked at that. She said, well, but that wasn't really a direct ruling. It was just the Supreme Court kind of ruminating. Yeah, but you know what? If they found it to be constitutionally deficient, they probably would have ruminated in a different way. But it really is amazing, because 4 federal judges, the Supreme Court, and the historical practice all support special counsel just like Jack Smith. But Trump-appointed Judge Aileen Cannon knows better. And I think what she did is she picked up on that little note that Justice Clarence Thomas attached to the absolute immunity case, saying, hey, Judge Cannon, have a look at Jack Smith's appointment. I don't think it's kosher. And that's what she picked up on. In fact, she cited Clarence Thomas's separate opinion in the absolute immunity case 3 times in ruling that Jack Smith is not lawfully appointed.
Right. Let's be clear. That wink and a nod that Judge Clarence Thomas handed down was intended for one person, and that person picked up what he was putting down and ruled accordingly, knowing full well that she has at least one sympathetic ear on the U.S. Supreme Court, if not more. Glenn, if the Supreme Court does ultimately side with Judge Cannon and finds that special counsels are unconstitutional, what happens to every case prosecuted by a special counsel? We have the ongoing D.C. case that has a special counsel, Jack Smith, but also I don't know how many dozens of cases have been prosecuted by special counsels, including the Hunter Biden case that the Republicans were falling over themselves to see prosecuted, and the Mueller cases, which resulted in, I believe, 34 criminal indictments.
That is a frightening question. Let me try to answer it. So I don't think if the Supreme Court says, yep, special counsel, they were not lawfully appointed all along. So let's go back and see how many convictions they've won over the decades that they've been used by the Department of Justice. I do not think that would result in anybody going back and invalidating all of those convictions. Here's why I say it. When the Supreme Court decides a principle of the Constitution, like they interpret the Constitution in a new way, like, let me use this as an example. Remember when women had constitutionally protected privacy rights to make their own reproductive health decisions, and then those rights were revoked? Well, that is a reinterpretation of the Constitution, and that does have what we call retroactive effect. So you have to apply it even to old issues that were decided previously. That, I don't believe, will be the case when they simply look at the appointment of a particular prosecutor and say, well, you know what, it should have been done in a different way. I do not think that will result in, the Department of Justice having to go back and literally vacate or throw out all of the old convictions that were obtained by other special counsel.
With that said, that's not to say that these Republicans, for example, who were indicted in the Mueller probe won't try, because that
they'll try. They'll file motions and they'll fight it.
Yep, it'll take all of 5 minutes before we see those motions to overturn these convictions handed down. Okay, let's finish off with this. Do you think right now that Jack Smith has egg on his face by virtue of not seeking to remove Judge Cannon earlier, given that now we're in a situation where she dismissed the case altogether and may very well get validated at the U.S. Supreme Court, meaning that there is no recourse for Jack Smith?
I won't call it egg on Jack Smith's face. I will say I would have struck a different balance as a former career prosecutor. I long ago would have filed a motion to have her removed, to recuse, because the federal standard supports a motion to recuse Judge Aileen Cannon. Jack Smith decided not to for whatever reason. I do wish that issue had been litigated in the full light of day so we could have seen the briefs and the arguments and the law on both sides of that and get the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals to weigh in. But now, in hindsight, now that she has made this largely unsupportable ruling, I think it does give Jack Smith additional fodder. So when he appeals this, that's when, for the first time, you may see him throw in a motion to remove her from the case.
Okay, real quick question on that. Is that something that would be able to be appealed up to the Supreme Court?
I believe that would go first to the trial court judge, because the judge actually gets to act on the motion to remove themselves. Assuming Judge Cannon denied it, it would go up to the 11th Circuit. Assuming the 11th Circuit granted it and kicked her off, I am positive Donald Trump's lawyers would appeal it to the Supreme Court, and I have a feeling the Supreme Court would be keenly interested in taking that issue up, given the recent absolute immunity issue. They seem to want to grab onto any case, any issue that might work to Donald Trump's advantage.
Okay, well, we will, of course, stay on top of this case as it continues to work its way through the legal system here. For those watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Taylor Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.